Hi, I'm Scott Wilson, and this first class we're going to have on photography is going to cover composition. And composition is something that is what brings the entire picture together and gives you the story you want to tell. We'll go over a few basic rules, and like anything in art, rules are meant to be broken from time to time. Composition can be quite detailed, and it could take several hours to explain this. We're not going to do that in this video. We're going to focus on just a few key principles and then practice from there and move on. Yeah, so one of the things we're going to be taking a look at, we're going to talk about the rule of thirds. We're going to look for patterns in the landscape, then use lines and shapes to draw interest to your picture. And the one thing you need to take into consideration when taking a picture is that a picture needs to tell a story. I love this view. How this creek over here forms leading lines that takes your eyes back, and back at the very far end of this picture is the Knik Glacier that dumps into the Knik River, which dumps into the ocean over here. So not too far away from the ocean. I'm about 40 feet above sea level at this location. But it does create quite a dramatic landscape, and it's a real pretty location, especially in the fall time when you can get all the different colors of foliage. But one of my favorite places to take pictures is out in this area. Okay, another thing when looking at composition, take a look at this bridge and notice how these leading lines down here, draw interest and draw your eyes to the middle of the bridge. These are things that create interest. Now, if we turn the camera a little bit this way, we can use a different type of composition. Using the rule of thirds, we can have a third sky, third landscape, and then a third river. It balances out the shot, and it just draws additional interest to it. But these are some of the interesting things. The other thing is, what I really love is how the freezing fog comes down here and just gives everything a frosty white. Of course, the camera's not picking it up too good, but it's winter time. Here's another example of how you can use a trail to create leading lines, and you can frame your shot within the trees to make an interesting composition. And it also makes a pretty good portrait when you come through the middle. One of the things I love about the snow, though, it gives everything a three-dimensional effect. It's kind of cool. With those things in mind, we're going to finish the rest of this class indoors. Take care now. Now, looking at this particular portrait, you can see the rule of thirds I applied on the bottom with the river. Then you have the land in the middle with this open sky on top. I also liked how the bridge drew interest into the center of the picture. With this picture of the moose, I tried to get the moose as close to the center as possible, but the foreground gives us a depth of field because the foreground is out of focus, but you've got about a third on the bottom, and then above the grass you have about a third. Plus you have space on both sides of the moose, giving this a center picture that gives you a dramatic depth of field. Now, with these three swans taken off over the Chugach Mountains from Jim Lake, you see the lake and the trees in the foreground make up the bottom third, with the mountain taking the middle, and then you have all this negative space in the sky, just giving this a nice, peaceful, serene look. Now, in this particular picture, I use leading lines of the creek to draw your eyes from the foreground of the picture up the creek and into the background of the picture. And notice how the landscape lines of the trees, the ridge line, follows down to the creek and draws your eyes to the center. Here's another example where the main subject of the picture is, of course, in the center. This is the city of Palmer, Alaska, where I live. And you've got the leading lines from the river going in, drawing your eyes to the middle of the city. And then you also have the mountain ridge line, which also attracts your eyes. And from Pioneer Peak, there on the right side of the picture, as you follow the ridge line down, it again brings your attention to the middle of the city. Now, on an animal portrait like this, the bald eagle, I put on the right side of the picture, so the face or the subject has room to breathe. You want to not put their face on the edge of the picture, but give it more space than you would the back of the head. And then the light coming from the west over the mountains, shining on his head. I just thought this was a nice dramatic portrait of this majestic animal. Now, this particular duck is known as a widgeon. He was bathing himself in the water, and those little specks at the top of the screen are actually flying water droplets. But I used the rule of thirds with the duck in the center, showing open space to the front and to the back of the animal to give this picture a balance to it. And this picture of the seagull on top of a wood stump, I liked how the lichen brought out the texture in the wood and gives it a three-dimensional look. I also used a very shallow depth of field, which is another technique I'll talk about in future trainings. But I liked how it softened out the background to the point where the bird is the only thing in this picture that you can see. Now, this picture with the sparrow, I use leading lines with these tree branches to draw your eyes from the V at the bottom below the bird. It immediately pulls your eyes right up to the face of the sparrow. By using a shallow depth of field, it softened out the background so this bird just stands out. Now, in this particular picture, again, the creek provides the leading lines that draws your eyes from the foreground and falls back to the tree line in the background. Also, the mountain ridge bringing down brings your eyes to a focal point on the left third of the picture with open space showing a big open sky. I just thought this was a nice scene. It's a very peaceful area. Now, in this particular example, this was taken 25 miles off the coast of Cancun. We were diving for whale sharks, and unfortunately, the camera malfunctioned when we were down taking pictures of the fish. So we got this picture. But what I liked about this particular picture was it showed that depth of field with Raquel here in the foreground and the boat clear off in the background. It just kind of gives you a feeling that we're just out there in the water. And this just gives you that feeling that this is an adventure. Now, one of the other rules of composition that you want to be aware of is just keep it simple. You don't want too much in the picture. And so with this picture of the moose, I used the moose on the left third of the picture and his body or her body on the back side leading off onto the right side of the picture. But again, simplicity is the key to a good composition. Now, this picture of the bald eagle, I centered it as much as possible. But again, simplicity, this animal was just hunting in the trees, and it was just I thought it was a really cool shot. But I tried to balance the picture with the bird directly in the center. I liked the diagonal angle of his wings that really stands out in there, but he blends in well with the background. He was very difficult to see. Now, this particular picture was taken last spring. I was coming home from the theater when the Aurora Borealis was out shining. One of the most difficult things about taking these particular shots is to get the focus right. It's really hard to focus in the dark. So what I did was I focused on one of the houses, and then I pointed the camera in the direction of where the auroras were shining their brightest, and then set it for a 20-second exposure, and this is what I came up with. But when taking these kind of aurora borealis, sometimes you want to give more than a third to the night sky, because it's very dramatic, and the northern lights are constantly in a state of change. But I hope you enjoyed these pictures. That was a quick down and dirty. This is my first class on doing anything with photography, so I hope you enjoyed this class. I hope you got something out of it. And please give me a comment, whether you liked it, whether you hated it, whether this confused you even further, or whether you got something beneficial from it. But it's been a pleasure. I look forward to doing more videos, and as I develop my video making skills, we'll add some music, add some composition, and hopefully in the future we can actually take trips and go on photo excursions together with some of you. And this should be a fun learning experience for all of us. And thank you so much for being a part of my Facebook group. Thanks. Bye.